What is up, y'all? My name is Keela, and I am so glad that you are watching with us today. Hey, if you are new around here, or honestly, if you've been watching for a while, we would love to connect with you. So in our chat or in our comment section, let us know where you're watching from, or if you have any questions about Flatirons, our ministries, and what we're doing around here, we would love to get connected with you, especially if you are in the Denver, Boulder area. I don't know if you know this, but we have 5 campuses across the Front Range, and I would love to help you get connected into some community, find your people, find the right campus for you. So don't be afraid to reach out in that chat section. Let us know how we can help. Hey, here at Flatirons, we are on a mission to bring the awesome life of Christ to people in a lost and broken world. And one of the most effective ways that you guys can join us in that mission is by subscribing to this channel, sharing and liking our content when it's impactful for you. You guys just have no idea the kind of reach that has. And we just want to remind people that God is for them, and so are we. We hope you enjoy the service. Let's go.
Every single week matters. We're going to talk about that today, but one thing I want to get out in front of you is because we believe that every single week matters, we want to not just walk alongside you all on Sundays, but also Mondays through Saturdays throughout the week. And you heard about it last week if you were here, but we want to send you a text message every week with one step that you can take to grow in your faith every single week to be intentional. And so if you want to text the word NEXT to 80857. So you can pull out your phones right now. You can pull out your phones in church. 80857. Text the word NEXT. And once a week, we're just going to send you something to think about, something to apply, something to do to grow in your faith, because we want to walk alongside you, not just on Sundays, but Monday through Saturday as well. So today we are starting a new series called Cause and Effect, and it kind of builds on what we were talking about the last month, this life of Abraham and the journey of faith that we're starting to take as a church. And we talked all last series about what does it look like to have faith. And so this series, we're actually going to look at some further questions. If you have faith, then what happens? I mean, if you've been saved by grace, then what? And there's this tension between faith and between works. There's this tension between truth and grace. And we talk a ton about grace in here, how we're all sinners. We've been saved by God's grace, not by our own works, so that nobody can boast. It's all a gift from God. But at the same time, we're saved by grace through faith, but there's tension. Because if we're made righteous through faith and faith alone, if we're saved by grace and grace alone, then how much does it really matter for our lives to start to reflect that faith and reflect that grace? Because for so many of us, we've been coming here for years and we've prayed the prayer, okay, we gotten baptized, we have faith, we've been given grace, but at the same time, if we are honest, not really much has changed. Or we've been coming to church our whole life, but it's like we hit this rut. And our walk with God is just this same thing, monotonous day after monotonous day. Nothing really is changing. And deep down, here's the thing. Most of us, we know that there's an issue with that, okay? We know that if we have faith, the best way to demonstrate that we believe what Jesus believed is to live our lives the way that he lived his life. I mean, our lives would actually start to reflect, hey, we've got confidence that Jesus meant every single word that he said. His way of doing life is a better way than our way of doing life. And so we're going to spend this series looking at some examples from the life of Jesus, some of the people that he interacted with, some of the stories that he told, and then we're going to some of the lessons from those stories and apply them to us in Colorado in the 21st century. And just a forewarning, some of us are not going to like these stories, okay? We're just not going to like them. And if you have problems, email Jesus, not me, okay? All right? Stories about what we did with the one life that we had. That's what this is about. You see, one of the honors of serving as a pastor here is when somebody trusts us to officiate the funeral of somebody they love who's passed away. See, in the middle of a family that's grieving, we get to take about an hour and we tell the story about the life of somebody. And then we get to share the hope of Jesus with people, and they might never hear it again because they're not coming to church for anything but a funeral. And I'll tell you, like personally, I've had some of the most fulfilling weeks on the job because of funerals. And my hardest week on the job, hands down, was when I had 2 funerals in 1 week. One was a young man with a little baby and a wife who took his life on a Wednesday, and then on the Friday, it was a 3-year-old. They're some of the most hardest, painful, and at the same time, can be beautiful and hopeful parts of the job. And anytime I'm officiating a funeral, I spend some time with the family and I ask them some questions, but I always start with one question. What do you want people walking away remembering about this person? I want them to boil their life down to one or two primary characteristics. So often it's like, man, they love their family so much, or they were such a selfless person, they spent all their time serving others, or they just brought joy into everybody's lives. I remember years and years ago, I was talking with this woman who lost her husband. I asked her that question, what do you want people remembering? What did they care about most? And she stopped for a minute, and then she said, sports. And before I asked if the man was a coach or a player or anything, she said he really liked watching sports. He really liked the Lakers. And I'm telling you guys, in the moment, I was convicted. Because if you looked at our lives, if you looked at many of our calendars, if you look at the way we spend our money and we died today, if people were honest with that question, they might say about Jesse, man, he really loved work. She really loved shopping. He really loved hobbies. You see, everybody in this room right now, Christian or not, doesn't matter if you have a faith background or not, we understand this. We understand that a day is coming where your life is going to be boiled down to an hour-long service. 1 hour-long service. And a day is coming where we'll be remembered for what we did and not for what we intended to do. Okay, a day with no excuses, no good intentions, no, I wanted to. It's just gonna be what we did. What you did with that job, what you did with that family, what you did with that income, what you did with that one and only life. So Jesus, he's gonna encounter some people. He's gonna have some conversations. He's gonna tell some stories. And he talks about a reality that we all know, but at the same time, we rarely think about it. And these are gonna be some examples to us. They're also gonna be some warnings to us. But mostly, it's an encouragement to make some changes that deep down, we really need to make. And so today, we're gonna look at two examples. You'll find the first one in Matthew chapter 19. If you brought your Bible, it's about 3/4 of the way through. One of our goals for everybody who attends Flatirons is that we learn how to handle the Word of God and then submit our lives to it, which means we want you to be able to understand what the Bible is saying and then know what you need to do in response to it. That's why we've got free Bibles in the back of every single one of our campuses, and that's why so many of you guys are carrying around those like 8-pound ESV study Bibles, because you're like, I want to understand what we're reading. And so it starts out, and it says, and behold, a man came up to him saying, teacher, what good deed must I do to have eternal life? Now, from reading on in the story, we know three things about this man, okay? I want to point out three things that we find out about him. Number one, he's rich, okay? He's got many possessions. Number two, he's young. He's somewhere between the ages of 20 and 40. And then he was a ruler. And so as a ruler, he was part of the ruling class. Maybe he was even one of the religious leaders. This is the type of man that comes up to Jesus. And so Jesus responds to him and he says, why do you ask me about what is good? There's only one who's good. If you'd enter life, then keep the commandments. So Jesus clarifies for the man, there's only one person who's good, which is kind of setting context for the man. What he's saying is, hey, I know you've done a lot of good deeds, but your good deeds do not come close to the goodness of God. There's only one who's good. Jesus starts to illustrate it. He says, if you would enter life. And Jesus uses a few different phrases to mean the same thing. He uses enter life. He uses eternal life. He uses be saved. He uses enter the kingdom. All these mean the same thing. It means come be a part of what I'm doing, both now, but also forever into the future. And Jesus tells him, hey, a good start, keep the commandments. It's a good start to just show that you put your faith in God. And the man continues, he says to him, which one? So the man says, Jesus, which one do I need to keep? And Jesus said, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, honor your father and mother, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now, what's interesting right here is that Jesus, he doesn't mention the first 5 commandments about loving and honoring God. Instead, he focuses on the 5 commandments that come after that about loving and honoring the people around you. Because Jesus knows that what you believe about God is always revealed with how you treat people. It's always revealed. So the young man, look at what he says back to him. The young man said, all these I've kept. What do I still lack? So you can see the guy's not really getting the point, okay? He's answering Jesus so quickly. He's telling Jesus he's perfectly honored his mother and father for all of his life. He's telling Jesus he's perfectly loved his neighbor exactly as he loved himself. I mean, the guy kind of seems arrogant, like full of himself, walking around like he's better than everybody else. I mean, he sounds kind of like a Chiefs fan to me, you know? Y'all need to lighten up. Oh, we won all the Super Bowls, you know, shut up. It's almost like this guy, you can hear it in how he talks. It's like, Jesus, I'm doing all the right things. I made the money. I got the social status. Almost like he's expecting Jesus to be like, oh my gosh, wow. Why am I spending all my time with these other 12 dummies when I could have you on my team? Thanks for picking Team Jesus. Yeah, this is gonna be awesome. The man is not getting the point. He's still trying to earn eternal life. He's still trying to earn a right relationship with God. He's still putting his hope in what he earned. And so verse 21 says this, okay, Jesus says to him, if you would be perfect, which means kind of complete, this means mature, this means if you're gonna do it all on your own, if you would be perfect, go sell what you possess and give to the poor. You'll have treasure in heaven. And then come and follow me after you've done that. See, Jesus doesn't tell the man to give some of what he had to the poor. Because in some ways, when you're a rich guy who's kind of self-important, when you give out of an abundance and you just give a little bit, it can make you feel more important. It can make you feel more powerful, more prideful, almost like you're more deserving of God's grace. But what Jesus knew about this man is that his possessions had a hold of his heart. You see, he may have kept all the commandments like he said he did, but there was one part of his life that was off limits. We're all tempted to do that. It's like, Jesus, I will follow you with everything except for my dating. Jesus, I'll do everything that you tell me to do except with my finances. We all have these areas that we tell God they're off limits. Just like Jim talked about last week. God, you can have anything but that category of my life. Jesus knew that this man's possessions, they're the thing that has a hold of his heart. Jesus even tells us this by the words that he uses, and this is gonna get a little Bible nerdy on you right now, okay? But in the original Greek language, which just paints a better picture than English does, there are actually two different words that you can use for the word possess. One is a pretty straightforward word. It means to possess, it means to have. But Jesus chooses not to use that word. Instead, he uses this word called huparko to describe the man, which can be translated like this: to possess, to have, to be, to exist. Because Jesus knows that for this man, and the tendency for a lot of us, is so often what we have gets all tied up in who we are. You see, you get new clothes and all of a sudden you feel more confident. You buy the new truck and all of a sudden you feel more successful. What we have gets tied up in who we are. And Jesus tells this man to trade his treasure here, trade his identity here for treasure and identity in heaven in Jesus' kingdom. Jesus, in verse 21, I'll just repeat it, he said to him, if you be perfect, go sell what you possess, give to the poor, and then you will have treasure in heaven, which means storerooms and storerooms of precious things moths can't destroy, rust won't wear out, that won't go away the moment that you're dead. You can have all this in heaven, and come follow me. And look how the man responds. When the young man heard this, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. And he had some stuff here on earth. And this successful, influential young man chooses not to make the trade. The surprising thing about the story is that Jesus lets the man walk. You know, today, like, if I was Jesus, and we're all glad that I'm not, okay, but I would be tempted to like run after him and be like, hey man, just keep your head up, just keep trying. Growth takes time, life's a journey, you'll get there someday, and all those things are true. But at the same time, that's not what Jesus says to the man. Why? Because Jesus knows the kingdom is not an add-on. Eternal life is not an add-on. Following Jesus is not an add-on. It's the complete trade. It's saying, Jesus, I'm trading my possessions for your treasure. I'm trading my identity for your identity. Jesus, I'm trading my way of living for your way of living. I'm trading what I have for what you promised to give me. I want you to think about it. What kind of a God makes that trade? Where we give him the little stuff that we have and he gives us so much more. What kind of a God makes that trade? And the rich man walks away from the trade. I know the question so many of you guys are asking right now. So Jesse, are you telling us that Jesus is telling all of us we need to sell all of our possessions and give the money away? Let me be clear. I am not telling you that's what Jesus is telling you to do. But at the same time, I'm not telling you that's not what Jesus is telling you to do. I mean, that's between you and God. But giving away what we have, that's not what this example is about. This example is about a man whose heart couldn't let go of his stuff. It's about a man who put his hope into what he had earned, and he could not let go of it. It's about a man who chose his money over following Jesus. Here's the better question for all of us right now. The question isn't, is God telling us to sell our stuff? The more important question is, if God did, what would you choose? I mean, if God told you to stop sleeping with your girlfriend, if God told you to throw out all the alcohol and to get sober, if God told you to start giving away more of your money, more of your income, what would you choose? I told you guys you weren't gonna like these stories, okay? We're gonna look at a second story. It's very similar. If you didn't like that first story, you're really not gonna like this second one, okay? It's in Luke chapter 12. Jesus is teaching some people, and he's gonna tell them a parable. He's gonna tell them a story. He says, and he told them a parable, saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. And the man thought to himself, well, man, what should I do? I have nowhere to store my crops. Then he said, I'll do this. I will tear down my barns. I'll build larger ones. There I'll store all my grain and all my goods. And then I will say to my soul, he's speaking to his soul, I'll say, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you. The things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. So is this saying that saving is bad? That investing in big barns and investing in the future so you can have bigger barns is bad? No. Proverbs talks about setting aside money for the future. Saving money isn't bad. It's actually what Proverbs says is a wise thing. Hoarding money, that's a different story, but saving is a good thing. Is this saying that we shouldn't enjoy what we have? No. I mean, Jesus, one of the descriptions of Jesus and the disciples is that they came eating and drinking, which means they enjoyed good food. They enjoyed good wine. Is it wrong for you to enjoy what you have? No. Is this saying that being rich is bad? No. Is this saying that if you're not rich toward God, you're gonna die? Well, I'm just kidding with you guys, all right? You guys are taking this too seriously. This parable is about recognizing where it all comes from. You see, it's about where you put your hope. This man's issue is that he put all of his hope, all of his happiness, all of his fulfillment into what he's stored up for himself. The man made two critical misunderstandings. Ones that actually made him a fool, which means somebody who's not thinking it through. The first is that he thought that he himself was the one that earned all of his wealth. And two, he was living like this life is all that there is. I want you to look at how many times this man says I or my in this section. Look at this. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. If you count it 11 times. But look at where the goods and the crops and the wealth came from. Where did he get them? Look back to the top. Jesus told him a parable saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. You see, the rich man didn't produce plentifully. The land produced plentifully. And who causes land to produce plentifully? See, Jesus knows something. He knows that when we start to experience abundance, our natural inclination is to think that we're the cause of it. See, in the Old Testament, God warns the people. He says it like this. He says, when you eat and are satisfied, When you build fine houses and settle down, when your herds and your flocks, they grow large, and your silver and your gold, they increase. All you have is multiplied, then your heart, it will become proud. You'll forget the Lord your God. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth. See, we all end up acting like it's all ours when in fact it's God who's the one that gave it to us. Let me give you an example. In my house, I do this thing with our kids. My wife Karen and I, we've got 4 kids. We do this thing called the dad tax. Does anybody know about this? Like the dad tax, you guys, some of you guys grew up in it. It's kind of a cruel thing, but I'm trying to teach them a point of view on taxes from an early age, okay? Like that's what I'm trying to do. And so I buy Ford this big thing of nerds, and he's eating them. And I say, hey, buddy, dad tax, can I have some? And he puts his hands around the nerds. And I was like, Ford, give me some nerds. He goes, I don't want to. I said, that's not how taxes work, buddy. Doesn't matter if you want to. You still got to pay them. And then did you parents in the room, do you ever get to the point where you're like, I shouldn't have picked this argument, but I have, and now I've got to like follow it through. Like, I do this all the time. My wife, Kara, she hates it. But I say, Ford, give me some nerds. And so Ford dumps out a bunch of nerds into his hands, and then he takes out one nerd. And he hands it over to me. And I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, you couldn't let go of your nerds? Don't you remember who gave you the nerds? And Ford forgot where the nerds came from. You see, we say all the time around here, sovereign God has entrusted you with part of his kingdom. Note that we don't say sovereign God has given you part of his kingdom. He's entrusted it because it's still his kingdom. We're not owners. We are stewards of it. You see, both these men, they had these misunderstandings. They had these misunderstandings that this world is all that there is, that this world is the most important, that this world is all that matters most. And here's the thing, if deep down you believe that this world matters most, then you're going to start spending all that you make in this world. You're gonna try to keep all that you have in this world. That's why right before telling this parable, Jesus actually says this. He says, watch out, be on your guard. So that's a double warning right there. He doesn't say just watch out once. He says, watch out, be on your guard. Double warning. This is very important against all kinds of greed. A reminder, your life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. You see, your life does not consist of what you have right now. There's a cycle when you begin to assume that this world is all that you have. You put all your hope into this world. And hope is just this way of saying the things that you want most in life, the things that you think will make your life better, they'll make your life better, happier, more fulfilled, any of those things, that's what you hope in. Here's the thing, honestly, it's hard to put your hope in the next world when you live in America. I mean, it'd be easier to put your hope in the next world when you live in the Middle Ages, okay? If you lived in like a underdeveloped third world country. Even worse if you lived in Nebraska. I mean, I just can't help myself today. But in modern day Colorado, okay, comfortable life, good house, good food, etc. It's so easy for us to put our hope and happiness and fulfillment in this world. The issue is, as comfortable as this world is, our world is still broken. And it was never designed to hold all of our hopes, all of our fulfillment, and all of our happiness. I mean, here's an example of the world's priorities, okay? You know the number one question that we've gotten about heaven the last 10 years? It's not like, what will heaven be like? It's not, will our bodies be healed up? It's not, will we recognize our loved ones? It's not, what's it gonna be like being in the presence of Jesus? Do you know the number one question? Will my dog or cat be there? Followed shortly by, because I don't know if I wanna go to heaven if my cat won't be there. Now, I don't know the answer to that question, okay? But if you want to be on the safe side, get a dog, because cats definitely are making it to heaven, all right? Like, guys, it's a treat today. But I want you to think about that statement, though. I don't want to go to a heaven where? We're saying that we don't want to go to heaven unless it resembles this broken world. Do you understand that? And so why are we surprised that when our hope in our heart is in this world, that anxiety has gone up, that depression has gone up, that suicide rates in teenagers have tripled? All the while you think about it, levels of happiness are dropping, sense of purposelessness is rising, the world feels more divided than ever. I want you to think about this. Why is it that we have more across the board than every generation in history? And at the same time, we're less happy, we're less fulfilled, we're more stressed, and we're more purposeless. And we get ourselves a new car, and we feel better for like a week. We get some new jeans, and we feel better for a day or two. We go to fancy brunch, and we feel better for an hour. But you felt this. It's just like they've got these diminishing returns. So it's constantly wanting something else, constantly wanting something more. And Jesus, he tells us that our hope and our heart and our money are intricately linked. He tells us exactly how to practice putting our hope and our heart in the kingdom of God and not in this world. He says it here, and this is the Sermon on the Mount. He says, don't lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And there's this concept that we need to pay attention to. Jesus tells us this. He says, our hearts follow our treasure. He says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be. Jesus actually knows if our hearts followed our treasure, if our treasure followed our hearts, he would have said it the other way around. But he knows our hearts. He knows it's the other way around. He knows that our hearts actually follow where we put our treasure, not the other way around. And so when you keep all of your treasure in this world, you start putting all your hope in this world. And your heart follows your treasure. When you start giving to the kingdom, you start putting your hope in the next world. And what happens when your hope is not in this world? We have more peace in the middle of uncertainty. You got more joy in the middle of heartache. You actually can have more calm in the middle of chaos. You'll have more fulfillment even when life's difficult. That's why Jesus tells a rich young ruler, you should actually trade in all your stuff, follow me, have treasure in heaven, because it's worth it. That's why he tells the rich man, you should have been rich toward God rather than trying to store up everything for yourself. That's why another time in the Bible, Jesus points out to his disciples, there's this widow, this very poor woman who's giving her last remaining pennies to the temple, and Jesus watches her and lets her do it. I want you to think about that. If you've grown up in church, you've heard that story. What would we say to that when we say that's irresponsible? But Jesus lets her do it. She's actually giving to a temple that Jesus speaks out against for injustice, and Jesus does not stop her from giving all that she has. Why? Because he knows some truth about money. He knows what it does to our hearts, and he knows when we give generously, it's actually scientifically proven it's good for our souls. When our hearts detach from this world, they actually have room to attach to God. And then when we demonstrate our faith, God demonstrates his faithfulness, and he does for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. So what do we do now? I want to give you some examples of what it actively looks like to resist putting our hope in this world and to start putting our treasure in God's kingdom. First example I have for you is this. Do a personal spending fast. So I have not told a ton of people about this, but I started a year-long personal spending fast this January. Last year, I was finding myself buying more clothes than I typically do, and I'm not really a fashionable guy. I was buying more technology. Like, I just love these gadgets. Overall, I was feeling more materialistic than I wanted to. And it came to a head in a definitive moment when Apple released the Apple Watch Ultra. All right? I mean, I've had an Apple Watch I've got on right now. I've had it for years. I love it. It keeps me on track with my calendar. It tracks my workouts. It tracks sleep. I can run without my phone and listen to podcasts. It's actually going to tell me how many calories I burn when I'm preaching. Does so many things. But then the Ultra came out. And do you ever do this thing where you start to convince yourself what you have is not good enough and you really need that next thing? And I start looking at my watch. I'm like, man, an extra 2 millimeters of screen would be really nice. I mean, going scuba diving up to 100 meters with my watch, I think I need that. I mean, I've never gone scuba diving before, but it would be nice if I wanted to. And at that moment, like I'm trying to convince myself with all these features, I'm like, I realize I have a problem. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to have an Apple Watch Ultra, okay? It's nothing wrong with having nice stuff in general. But for me, what I was finding is I was starting to attach to my stuff. And I needed a season to detach. So there are 3 areas I'm not gonna spend on in 2023. New clothes, unless something wears out and I need to replace it. New technology, unless something breaks. And yeah, you're right, I've thought about breaking my watch so I could get a new one. And the last thing I'm not buying this year is bourbon, which feels kind of weird telling you guys, but collecting bourbon is kind of a hobby for me. And so in 2023, I'm not buying any bourbon. And you might be like, Jesse, what's gonna happen if you run out of bourbon? And that's the problem, okay? Because if you've seen my basement closet, you know I'll be just fine through this spending fast. And I'm actually like, I'm looking forward to being more grateful. I think I'll be more grateful for the things that I have. And I think when like my birthday or Christmas comes around, my family gives me gifts, I think I'm gonna be more grateful for like these gifts rather than when it's just one more thing on top of everything I've already bought for myself. I think I'll be more grateful for gifts. Especially if it's an Apple Watch Ultra, Kara, if you're listening, okay? So maybe you need to declare a personal spending fast. For a month, for a few months, for a year. You decide on a few things that you're not gonna buy. You practice detaching from this world. Whatever that brings up for you, pay attention to it. Second thing is this. Ask God, what should I give? Where should I give it? Just pray a simple prayer. God, what should I give? Where should I give it? As a pastor, I've heard story after story about people whose pantries are down to their last 2 bags of ramen, and all of a sudden a King Soopers gift card miraculously appears. I've heard about people whose car breaks down and they miraculously get a check in the mail for the exact same amount. Found that people, they just feel like thing after thing is not going their way, and then they just get this random gift in the moment, and it feels like it's a gift from God. So what if we ask, say, God, what should I give, and where should I give it? You see, I really do believe that God wants to bless some families who are down to their last dollar, and they're not sure how they're gonna pay their heating bill. I think God wants to bless those families. I think God wants to bless some nonprofits because people, they don't even know we're writing really, really big random checks. See, I think God wants to bless some people who feel like God's against them, and just the smallest act of kindness is what it's gonna take to lift their head. I think God wants to bless some pastor who's on a spending freeze who miraculously gets an Apple Watch Ultra in the mail, okay? I'm just kidding, guys. I'm just kidding, please don't. Ask God, what should I give? Where should I give it? It's that simple. Last idea is this. Set up regular recurring giving, and now you're like getting cynical. You're like, here's where you do it. This is the point where you ask us for money. And I just want you guys to know from my heart 2 things. Number 1, I didn't even know I was gonna write this in here until I started writing this. But 2, it's less about you giving to Flatirons, and it's more about us practicing what God says about putting our treasure in the kingdom and putting our hope in the next world. I want you to do more that than you give to Flatirons. That's what I care about most. But why do I say recurring giving? Because of this. Because automation trumps determination. And you've seen this in every area of your life, all the important areas. You don't just decide like on the month, like, am I gonna pay my bills or not this month? You've pre-decided, I'm going to pay the bills. It's automatic, it's what I do. Or if you're somebody who goes to the gym, you don't decide every morning to wake up and go to the gym or not. You're not like, oh, am I gonna wake up and go to the gym or not? You pre-decided, it's just what we do. And what if with giving, rather than make the decision every week or every month, we made a one-time decision that we turn into a habit? Then at the end of the year, here's what I wanna challenge you to do. And some of you guys got your giving statements earlier this year. When you look back on what you gave throughout the year, I want you to think to yourself, man, what could I have done with that extra $1,000? What could I have done with that extra $5,000 or $10,000 or $100,000? What could I have done, and where could I have gone? Where could I have gone to eat? What could I have done? And then tell yourself, hey, I made a decision. I made a sacrifice, and I took what I could have had, and I took what I could have done here, and I invested it in the next world. I'm challenging you, take one of these challenges and commit to it for a time. whether it's 30 days, 90 days, a whole year, and see what God teaches you through it. See if it doesn't impact your faith. So I want to wrap this thing up. One of the things that I see in my generation, people in their 30s and 40s, and more than some of the generations that came up before us, is there seems to be this preoccupation with traveling to all the coolest places in the world. Going to eat at all the best restaurants and bars in the city. We spend more on new clothes and new toys and new stuff, and then obviously we post about it on social media, you know? And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. All right, Kara and I, we've got reservations for a nice dinner in a couple weeks. We're hoping to go on a fun vacation later this year. And I plan on buying some new clothes in 2024. But maybe you can resonate with this if you're in this generation. It's gone from something that we enjoy to something that we're entitled to. It's gone from like, wouldn't it be nice to do this, to I'm missing out if I don't go. It's gone from something that makes us happy to something that actually gives us a low-grade anxiety because we feel that there are so many things that we want to do and we're going to run out of time to experience it all. And that preoccupation with going to all the best places and eating all the best food, getting all the best stuff, it is slowly attaching our hearts to this world, making us believe that this world is what matters most, that this world is all that counts, that we need to experience everything we can in this world. And guys, when our hope is in this world, it should not surprise us again that we're more anxious, more unsettled, more lonely, more purposeless, and more depressed. It should not surprise us. We need a perspective shift. C.S. Lewis, he's an author in the 20th century, he says it like this. He says, if you read all throughout history, you'll find that the Christians who did the most for the present world were precisely the ones that thought the most of the next. They did the most for this world because they were able to keep this world in its proper place. They weren't trying to get something out of this world that it wasn't designed to give. Guys, I want to be really, really clear right now. This world is not all there is. See, Jesus makes a promise to us that there is a new world, that there is a new heaven, and that anything that we experience here, it puts it to shame. And Jesus has experienced both sides of it, okay? And he's going, if you only knew what it was like there, if you only saw this for what it is, there's no way you would have held on to this when you could have that. These guys, when we get to heaven, our tastes are gonna change. When we get to heaven, our tastes are gonna mature. Just like you look back and go, I can't believe I used to drink Busch Light, you know? Like, or you look back and you're like, I can't believe I spent money on a Nickelback album. You know, like it's going to be the same thing in the future. When we get to heaven, our tastes change. Everything I've read about heaven tells us that whatever we experience here on earth, heaven will be infinitely better. Everything we experience in heaven will put what we've experienced on earth to shame. And we'll be saying things in heaven like, I can't believe I used to like Wagyu ribeye. Because man, what we're eating in heaven is infinitely better. We'll say things like, I can't believe I used to drink Napa Valley wine because what we have in heaven is infinitely better. We'll say, I can't believe I used to dream of spending a week on the coast of Italy when what we have in heaven, we are sitting on the coast of eternity. Just day after day after day after day. And here's what's more, time in heaven works different. You see, God tells us what we'll remember about our time in this world. It's gonna feel like a split second compared to the rest of eternity. Or what we're experiencing then, what we're enjoying then is gonna last infinitely longer than what we're experiencing right now. Time will never run out. And here's the last thing. None of that will matter because we'll be in the presence of Jesus. We'll be face to face with Jesus because in the presence of Jesus, what we experience here on earth, it won't even have seemed like it was worth our time. We would trade in all of our experiences just to spend time with him. When we have all of heaven to enjoy, all of heaven to experience, all of heaven to look at its beauty, we won't even look at it. We'll be turning our backs and looking at Jesus because Jesus is better. And nothing else will matter because we're in the presence of Jesus. Flatirons, this world is not our home. What we have waiting for us is so much better, and who we have waiting for us is so much better. And at all of our campuses now, we're gonna stand up and we're gonna prepare to worship. So stand with me as we prepare to worship. This is our time to say, God, gonna trust you to help me let go of what I have here and hold on to you. God, you are better. Jesus, you are better. So God, we pray right now. God, we are grateful for your sacrifice. And God, so often we look at it and we don't remember how beautiful it was, how amazing it was. But right now in this moment, God, as we worship you, we just want you to hear, Jesus, you're better. Jesus, you're better than what we have. Jesus, you're better than what we experience. Jesus, you're even better than heaven. Jesus, you're better. And so we pray that, God, we sing that, God, we worship you. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Hey, thanks for joining us at Flatirons Church Online. We create new content all the time, including a live stream every Sunday. So you're not going to want to miss anything. Subscribe to our channel. And if you'd like to continue to support us in reaching people in a lost and broken world, go ahead and hit that Give Now button. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next Sunday.